important that we all, as part of professionals, keep our CPD up to date and lifelong learning, and we're delighted that we can continue to support you both as members and obviously other activities we do to ensure that you're keeping that CPD up to date. So delighted this morning to welcome Martin Perks and his team, and they presented to QSI per se as a board, but we thought this would be absolutely perfect for a First Thursday Club presentation. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Martin and the team and look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
So first of all, good morning, everybody. Can everybody see that's first slide?
We can, yes.
Good, Martin. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, that's the first technical hitch overcome. So good morning, my name's Martin Perks, and I've been a QS for the last 35 years. I have a history with the RICS as well as keeping in touch with the guys here at QSI. I was, until 12 months ago, a commercial program director in National Highways. And as a consequence of that, one of the things I was doing was running a team of people doing audits of projects to determine what was going right and what was going wrong. And one of the things that we discovered, and I'll get onto in a minute, is that whilst the projects were designed, procured, and the procurement models were for integrated project delivery, the commercial terms and conditions and space and agendas often caused that to fail and break down, and a lot of that was around the minutiae of applications for payment on regular cycles. And so Ian and Andy, who are with me, and I don't know whether you want to introduce yourself, Ian, and then Andy, or Andy and then Ian, are going to help me by running the demonstration a little bit later on. Ian, do you want to just pop in and say hello?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name's Ian Lever. I'm head of automation at Rock Technologies, and Corrier's an organisation that we're creating to address the things that we're working on with Martin. I'm kind of like Martin, but 35 years in technology rather than quantity surveying. So having worked for some big organisations and a lot of time around central government, and for some of that time I worked as a management consultant with McDonald as well, so some familiarity with the industry.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep, and Andy Land, I'm a principal technical consultant in Ian's team, so I'll be running the demo today during the presentation, and yeah, I'm a technical developer, so I've helped put together the solution that you're going to look at.
Okay, thanks. So what Digital Cost Engineer is about is looking, we've created the ability to rapidly at machine code speed look at lines of cost data that come in or are produced by a contractor for assurance and payment through NEC. For contracts predominantly is where we've started our tool design, but it can be adapted for any form of contract. So I'll give you a bit of the backstory, really. So Road Investment Strategy 2 was investing £27 billion. They've just, on the 26th of March, announced Road Investment Strategy 3, and it's about the same amount of money. Usual government, give with one hand, take with the other. So with 27 billion you've got to offer 22.7 billion back in efficiency. So actually you're only going to get 24.5 billion in cash. And we were faced with a real problem where projects, and you may see some of this and correlate with what the things you do, you may not, I don't know. And projects routinely were 30 to 50% over budget by the time they were finished. They're road projects, they're 3 to 5 years. Overspend wasn't evident really, because people were misappropriating information, so sort of keeping under wraps that it was going a bit awry. So 75% through the project, we were getting lots of investment requests coming back and saying, we're going to overspend, can we have some more money, please? Lots of time between actually opening the road and finishing off the account. Usually those projects ended in a commercial settlement. If you're trying to get accountability in the public sector, that's a that's a tricky space to be in. And when we audited these 26 of these projects, live, ongoing with a forensic audit using the Orange Partnership and Deloitte as independents, we were finding that between 17 and 21% of the money we were spending, we didn't need to have spent. Now, some of that was we didn't need to have spent it at the time we spent it, but most of it was we didn't really need to spend it at all. So out of those 26 audits, we got 1,200 non-conformances. Lots and lots of those were the same across all 26 projects, and we analysed those up to determine what it was that were the root causes of those things. And there was predominantly, and you can see, I'm just going to leave you with these slides afterwards so you can read through this as you go, but predominantly there were two things that made everybody's life difficult. And the first thing, which if you are sitting in a contractor this morning, you'll go, of course, that's right, which was the client actually wasn't acting as the client said they were going to act in their contract. They didn't actually understand their role. So the procurement team, the legal team had put together the contract. And by the time it got to the delivery teams, they were doing what they thought the best thing to do was. They weren't actually acting as the client under the contract. And a lot of that is we'd appointed an independent project manager, so leave the project manager to do what they're supposed to do in an independent and impartial way, which is what the way NEC is written. So that was the first thing. The second thing was because the client was not acting as the client, lots of the activities that the contractor should have been doing weren't being done. And as a consequence of that, if you looked prima facie at the data, quite a lot of the data for cost shouldn't have been the basis of payment because it didn't actually comply with the application of the contract. So we were faced with this position of we didn't know we got £9 billion worth of work in progress. We'd done audits on projects, and we were looking for the reasons why things weren't going the way we wanted them to, and what we could do to make it better. And that's the point at which I started having a conversation with Ian. So at that point, I'm sitting as a client, and I'm having a conversation with Ian saying, where you get to this point of the contractor and the client and the project manager in the middle, looking at what payment is, and that's where all the friction starts. It's where everybody starts breaking down the integrated collaborative working. And so we were sitting there as a client going, well, really what we're looking at is the outcome. So we might want a new motorway junction like this one. We were delivering under something, it was a procurement model that was target value delivery. We designed it to be integrated project delivery. We've got a single type team objective, all those things there, common incentives, the whole shebang. We worked really hard on putting this together. But actually, when you got to the payment of the commercial thing, it just wasn't working. So we were scratching our heads and thinking about what we were to do. So one of the things I was getting feedback on was all the delivery teams seem to be able to work in a collaborative way, and they're working quite tight. But once you get to the money and the agendas, that's where it breaks down. And the people in those places, which is cost assurance, it's quantity surveying, it's all the things that you and I have been doing every day in the rest of our career. That's where the agendas start happening and the friction happens. And it's all about the minutiae that's causing and overwhelming people. So we started to have a look at what in the payment process actually caused those things. So and what we might be able to do to improve them. So the first thing I said to Ian was, is there a way that we can utilize process improvement, process automation, take people out of the assurance process? It doesn't mean that we're taking people out of the commercial management process. It's just taking them out of this monthly cycle of bashing against each other. How can we speed up money through that process? Because it takes forever. How can we look at preventing fraud by the automating process? And how can we reduce the need for things like project bank accounts? And one of the things that across the industry we experience and see, and we're told all the time, is this friction point, this point where money becomes more important than anything else because it's more difficult to get through the process. that's the point that causes so much stress and anxiety down in the subcontractor, the main contractor and the subcontractor spaces, and that's what contributes to suicides. And that's one of the main things that we were trying to alleviate. So we're looking at this payment process, and to do that, we then started to deconstruct the assurance process, and we looked at the problems in it. And it's all about the stuff that we see day to day, overwhelmed with data. Some of our projects were getting 100,000 lines of data every month, and those 100,000 lines needed to be gone through. And because of that, people were sampling them. They were taking the sample and extrapolating from it. Wasn't really in the right place. We've got lots of people who didn't really understand what was in the contract because they'd never actually seen the contract for a start off. They couldn't get access to it. It's multiple documents, very complicated legal language, didn't understand actually how it actually works. So they developed their own opinion. They developed their own interpretations. They moved to a place where they thought they were doing the right thing, but actually that wasn't the way that the whole thing was structured to work. And so you've got people who knew bits, people who knew lots, and people who knew nothing. And all those things come together to create this friction. And that generates some, in lots of projects, a bit of a blame culture, and people are avoiding blame. Excuse me. We didn't have a lot of the projects, we didn't have triangulation of information from the supervisor. And when you boil all that down, it means we didn't really have a means to prevent fraud going on in the structure. So we looked at what works in the contract. What we found was from these 1,200 findings was that the contract probably works, but we didn't really know because not many people at all were actually applying the contract. So when I was getting challenged by the board to say this form of contract doesn't work, I'm kind of sitting there going, well, we don't really know whether it works because what's been done out on the ground isn't actually what's structured in the contract. So that's all around the things that you can see there. And a lot of the things that we found was that data standards weren't clear in the contract, and the data between organizations at every level for all sorts of things was not really compatible and not mapped. And so that boiled us down. I sat in a meeting in 2022 where we were talking to 6 different areas of national highways, and they all had their own coding system for the same thing. So we had 6 different coding systems inside one organization for the same things, where we were supposed to be the asset owner and having the structure organized and sorted out. So again, the client being its own worst enemy. So we worked out this all starts really in the procurement stage. So if you're a degree off the tee at the beginning, you're going to miss it by miles. We didn't understand what the transfer risk was really. People that had the risk transferred to them and had it done in the procurement process, the guys on the ground really didn't understand the deal. We hadn't selected suppliers with the right competence. We'd selected the best competence out of what had been bid. And there was a really poor understanding of how all of that fitted into the legislative landscape when we did procure it, and why we procured it the way we procured it, and how that works within the delivery landscape. So as a client, we were focusing on why we wanted this thing done. So we wanted an asset, we wanted it built clean, we wanted it built fast, we wanted it built for the right price, and we wanted it operating as quick as possible. Now, that's not really what the group in the delivery team were focused on. They were focused on the contract and the transactional activity of actually getting the work done, providing the work. So we started to look at how we correlated the business need into and through to the teams on the ground. And so we could have the ability to look at the options, solutions, permissions, detailed design, construction, and hand back, and make sure that we had this golden thread of stuff happening all the way through. And that included down into the cost assurance and making sure, you know, the primary thing about paying for work is that the cost was incurred to provide the work. And actually, we couldn't, in a lot of cases, we could see that the cost had been incurred by the team delivering the work, but we couldn't correlate back to what it actually provided. So Andy's going to leap into doing a demo now, but here's a bit of an overview of what that's going to be. So we created a simulation low-code tool, which is what you're going to see now, so that we could simulate it, do a pilot, do some tests on real live data, which you're going to see as well. The demonstration is going to show you that a machine that is using human speed, so it does each activity so that you can see what's happening. The software that we've developed does that automatically. So there's no point in showing you the software because you put in a big spreadsheet at one end and 5 minutes later you get out your analyzed data, but you wouldn't see what was going on inside the machine. So this is using sample data against a human scale activity, and so it'll give you an idea of what we do, and I'll come back to tell you how that all relates to where you are after Andy's finished. So I'm going to stop sharing. Andy, you can perhaps share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. So yeah, I'm going to start sharing now. I'm going to start sharing a process diagram rather than the application. I'll just quickly talk that through. Hopefully you can see that on the screen coming up now. So Martin's been talking about the fact that we built a tool to help assist with the defined cost assurance process, and that's obviously got quite a broad application of parties involved. We're going to be focusing in the course of the demo on just the part which deals with assurance, and the reason I'm showing the process is just to give you a sense of the kind of the aspects of cost assurance which we feed into this, and generally the approach that we intend to follow when it comes to supporting cost assurance and when augmenting the human effort with automated support. So this looks like a complicated diagram, but it's actually saying something really quite straightforward. If you look at the boxes across the top, you'll notice that these are all listed as being performed by an automated platform. And essentially what it's really saying is that during an automated insurance process, we're going to provide support which is general. So support which is coming from what we're calling here global data, but it could be information like pricing data or historical performance coming in, essentially things which don't vary according to the scheme or project that you're currently working on. And then you have the obverse of that, the things which do vary according to the scheme or project that you're working on. And those could be supporting information coming from various systems, or they could come from just external information that's being provided. And they can also be developed during the course of the project. And that's an important part of the overall solution, is to develop analysis over the course of the project to help you improve. So when you discover some kind of insight which helps you with the cost assurance process, you can plug that into the system and that continues operating going forward. So you're not reinventing the wheel every month. If you discover an insight, that gets applied every month through from that point on. So that's that kind of project specific analysis. You apply those types of analysis, and at that point you then perform the automated part of the assurance. That can then produce recommendations. Recommendations might be to pay that cost, hopefully in the happy path, and that would then flow down through to the payment approval process, which is a straightforward one of responsibility for the project manager. But it might also mean that something might actually was a disallowed cost, or it might be that it actually needs some kind of check still. So not taking the human out of the loop. That's obviously these days it's an important consideration that people are aware of, that you need to make sure that you're able to deal with the cases that the automation isn't sure enough about in order to make a concrete decision. That's always going to be part of the story. Right, so that's the general kind of idea of the process. And you can see there's lots of information and various possible flows, but that's the high level view of it. So I realise this is a small screen at the moment, so everybody will be squinting. I'll zoom in a moment, but because the table's quite big, I have to zoom out initially to show you the whole table, and I'll zoom back into it in a moment so it's easier to read. But this is a view of the data for a real project that's been anonymised. So you can see it's a National Highways major project. We have information from this from its inception in January 23 up to February 25. Project is still ongoing, but this is, for the purposes of the demo, this is the anonymized version that they can run to Feb 25. And this is a view of the cost information that was shared between the primary supplier and the cost assurance team, the project managers, over the course of that period through those various payment requests. You can see, I'll zoom in a bit now. We'll go back to normal 100%. Now you can see that the total value of the cost that was shared for insurance during that period is about £230 million, and that there were about 333,000 lines of cost during that period. We found on average about 15,000 rows per month being exchanged, which is a lot of information to try and get through when you've only got a few days during the monthly drumbeat in order to perform your assurance job. So it's obviously a challenge. The part of the desired outcome, effectively, of the solution that we're going for is to help you rebalance the time that you use. So we're looking to make sure that the things which are obviously meeting rules that you've already set. So and we'll have a look at the types of rules that you might set during the course of a project are automatically found so that you can give quick responses to those. You can easily produce things like non-conformance reports where you found things that need to be addressed by the supplier, and you can send that back with very little effort because you can simply say, produce me my non-conformance report, and I'll send that back. It'll be fully detailed, explaining every non-conformance and what it's been found on and the reasons for it. And it frees up the time to go off and do things like change management instead. So that's so I'll just explain now what it is that we're looking at here in terms of the way that the information about the project has been deconstructed. So this is across the entire period of the project, and we have pivoted the data according to the control accounts towards which the cost was aligned. And those control accounts in this particular project are aligned with parts of the work breakdown structure, and that's what the description label is talking about here. So we have a work breakdown structure code as part of the control account. So effectively what it's doing is really grouping the costs by a broad type of the works that were that the costs were supposedly towards. So that's the kind of the rows in here, and you can see that then it's then decomposed into some further subdivisions. So I guess the most eye-catching ones are the colours. We'll talk about those, but effectively those are an indicator to you of the type of the results of the processing that's taken place. So we have these red, yellow, blue, green buckets, and they represent effectively highlights of the data. And when we delve into the data in more detail in a moment, you'll see those same colors being represented on a row by row basis, indicating effectively the most important pattern match which we've discovered against that particular row. So that's effectively the analysis part of it. And then on the right hand side, you've just got these 4 columns for assessment, which is none, accept, explain, and disallow. Hopefully those are reasonably self-explanatory, but none means it hasn't been assessed yet. Accept means it has been accepted as defined cost. Explain means it's still in question, which should only be a state which is held temporarily during the processing and application of the payment, and disallow is self-explanatory. So we have this kind of overall concept of the flow that the lines will go through, and in the real tool, that's exactly what would happen. So the costs are uploaded or transferred via API into the system. They are processed according to the rules that you've been party to and that you're aware of, and they flow through to their end states, some of which might mean there is action still to be performed here, please can you review these. But you then get the outputs like the non-conformance report or the certificate for payment, which can go to the project manager, and they then retain the ultimate authority over what actually gets decided. So that's the kind of high level view of what we're doing. If we look in more detail, and there's a whole block of interesting stuff here, but what we've got here should look reasonably familiar if anybody's had to do the kind of assurance process on a project of this kind, because it's broadly aligned with the type of data that the suppliers provide. So information that usually comes from their ERP system, and it's, if I click on the icon over here, so you'll see it's actually only a fraction of the information that we're capturing here, but it does represent the kind of core part of a standard for data that can be exchanged, which actually makes it possible to do the type of insurance we're talking about. So when we look at a contract, we're obviously thinking, well, what do I need in order to be able to fulfill the terms of this contract for assurance? So if there are clauses in the contract which require me to check something, I need information in order to be able to check that. So this is more representing actually what was the real state of information being passed for this particular project. So this project was initiated before the tool existed, so it didn't exist according to any standard that we were considering. So we worked with it in flight. Pardon me. We took the data in and developed the insights that we could from it. So working from left to right, there are certainly core parts of this which are absolutely critical, obviously. A unique transaction ID is obviously a critical part of any type of data standard. Otherwise, you can't tell if you're dealing with the same piece of information from one month to another. It's alignment with a particular payment request. At this particular view, I am looking at 14,602 lines, which only come from the latest payment request. So that's why we have a reduced amount here. If I show you this view here, we'll see that 14,602 is the number of rows, and it's the total value of February 25 was just short of £9 million. And you can see here that February, as I said, is still in assessment. So there are a number of rows which have assessment none, indicating they're still ready for assessment. And there are a small number which have been already set to disallow because they are part of overhead or method related cost. So if we come back to this view, which is looking exactly the same data, and if I scroll to the bottom, we'll see that same value because that's the number of it's the same number of rows and it's the same values. And we can see that being broken down. So we can see the some of these disallowed lines, which are contracted disallowed. So effectively, they're already marked as not to be paid. They're just information. So normally, you'd have to work out for yourself that there's things that you need to ignore. So that's already done for you, and the decision's been made. And then we have some rows which are marked in yellow. That means there's something which has been discovered about them, which indicates strongly that they should be disallowed anyway. In this particular case, the first row here, we can see that it's matching a rule called description omitted, which means there's no information about what this is for, which means it's impossible for you to tell that it should be paid. There's also no invoice associated with it. So that's also a challenge for any regime to be able to pay something legitimately. So this is the kind of broad level of information. Like I said, there are all of these extra pieces of information which help you delve in further. But fundamentally, the purpose here, if I open up the filters, you'll see some of the insights which are actually developing. See, this filter is very long. I'll close up the detailed filters here, and for the moment, we'll look at the idea of the rules. So you can see here the types of checks that you can perform automatically on the data, which can help you then data chain those together into either automated decision making or into recommendations which are contextually supported. So you can see, okay, well, it matches a certain number of conditions here. So that supports me in the decision that I need to make. So let's have a look at some things in more detail. So if I was to look at February, I filter down just the things which don't have a recommendation yet. That will eliminate everything where I've already decided what's going to happen. Actually, I need to invert that. Apologies. So you can see here that the matches are updating in real time as well. So now the red things have disappeared because they were already recommended, and we're left with things that we're still working through. So you can imagine that actually this number has gone down. And you can imagine that this effectively acts a little bit like a queue of things to work through. During any particular application, you're effectively working through until there's nothing left which doesn't have a supported recommendation to go to the project manager for the generation of the certificate. So if we're working through something like this, and I'm conscious that so this is a demo that normally goes on for up to an hour, so I'm going to have to skip some steps here. But if anybody's interested, there's obviously a chance to do demos again. If we're looking at things like this, then we clearly have certain types of insight that we want to develop. And I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the process that you have the opportunity to develop insights which are specific to the project. And in this particular listing here on the right, where I've listed a rule as P, that's a project-specific rule. So we have, and these are real rules which were really developed during the course of the scheme when it was in operation by the assurers. But of course, they didn't actually have the tool to do this. It was things that they were doing manually on an occasional basis. So they would run these types of analysis in Excel, and then when they received the next application, they would try and construct the data in such a way that they could rerun the analysis, or they would switch to doing a different type of analysis. Whereas in this case, what we can do is we can codify that and we simply run it going forward from that point on. So one of those was looking for damage. So if I filter for that, for February alone,
just Andy, this what we mean by damage is costs that were incurred because things were damaged. So broken windscreens, burst tires, bits of kit that were damaged that needed to be replaced. So that's what we meant by damage.
Yes, exactly. Which were specifically under the schedule cost components, not defined cost. So they were listed in the contract that those would not be payable. And so when those, and you can see here exactly the type of pattern which is being found and still being found in February 25, despite the fact that this was being raised way back in the earlier parts of the project, that damage would not be paid for. These are still being submitted, even in the latest version, in the latest payment request that you can see here. So easy to find and easy to respond to. So it's effectively done for you up front. If we were confident enough that our matches were all good, and you can look at the lines here and you can see that they do all relate to things which are damage to plant, you can easily automatically recommend those to be disallowed, and not spend time looking at that, but instead deal with the true interesting edge cases. Description omitted, I already mentioned. Toll charges, similar one. Particular location, okay, there's no toll charges in February. I'll come back to looking at the whole of February. So the idea is that you codify these types of checks and they are automatically maintained from that point on. And effectively your quality of assurance during the course of the project is supported by the default rules that come from every project. So you, the rising tide raises all ships, if you like, in terms of the overall quality of rules which can be applied to a project going in. There's also analysis of the contract which needs to be done for rules which are unique to that particular scheme, or maybe just to the client and the industry as a whole. But as the project goes on, then obviously more rules are developed, and those continue to support the increasing quality of the assurance and the automation of it as you go forward. So there are various things that we can look at here in terms of the insights this approach lets you look at. We've looked at a type of search, so that's a search for a certain type of cost submission. There are other things which are more related to contractual financial kind of realities. One of the other major things that we saw during the course of analysis, and it wasn't just for this project, it was for other projects as well, was the idea of noise. So so noise being information which is provided in the application for payment, which does not require assurance. So it might be the case that it's information which is already disallowed by the contractor. I highlighted some of that earlier on. So it's information, it's cost information, which is genuine cost information, and it's not that you're not interested in it per se, but it isn't part of the assurance drumbeat, and sifting through it is taking time away from actually finding the things that do need assurance. But there is other types of information which is genuinely not useful. So in the case of the noise, if I was to pick this and have a look at it, so you can see here we have defined noise in this particular case as lines which are duplicated and which add up to 0 in the same payment period. We also sometimes call this journaling. So if I look at this particular list here, so this is examples of journaling. If I look at a particular row, you can see here that this row of information is duplicated, and it has a positive value and a negative value. Well, we call that journaling because we believe that really comes from ERP related efforts where they've entered it and then they have immediately decremented because they don't think it should be paid yet. But when you're looking at an AFP, if you don't have the ability to perform this type of row matching, this is just 2 rows which need to be analysed, and you have to try and work out what's going on. So this is doing that job for you and showing you that actually this pair of rows, they don't even require consideration. And to be honest, during the application for payment, they shouldn't be present because they represent nothing. So that's an example of the type of noise that you can eliminate. You can see that in February, there were 152 instances of that. But if I spread this out to the entire project, this will take a moment to load because we have quite a lot of information here. I take off no recommendation as well because the rest of the project has got recommendations on it. So you can see here that there was considerably more noise across the whole of the project, and that was simply causing overload for the assurers. So that gets removed. Another example of that type of analysis where you are looking for duplication is borrowing. So let's have a look at borrowing. So borrowing, I'll do the search first and then I'll show you the definition of the rule. The borrowing for us is lines which are part of a duplicate pair. So we just looked at duplicates there where there were two lines which were the same and they have zero total value, but unlike the noise, they're not part of the same application for payment. So if you have two lines which are adding up to nothing, but they're across more than one payment period, then effectively the project has loaned money to the supplier for a particular period. And you can see the total amount of money as a negative because we're looking at the return of the money. You can see the total amount of money that's been lent at some point for some period is £1 million for this particular project. And if we look down here at the particular the listing of those lines, and if I order them by value, and let's have a look at this particular row, you can see here that between October 23 and February 24, £45,000 was loaned on this particular line. And that would be extremely hard to find in normal assurance. And it's simply something that drops out of the type of analysis that we have here. You can see here also, incidentally, that this particular line doesn't have any invoice information either. So it was never supported by an invoice at any point. And so you can build rules which deal with these types of things. In this particular case, it might not be something you just want to disallow because actually by the time you recognize that this has happened, this is the point where they're returning the money and you don't want to disallow the returning of the money. What you want to do is query why it happened in the first place. So this is the type of insight that you can do something with. And there's other types of things that you can do as well. So for instance, you'll be maintaining a list of different subcontractors, and you can make sure that you know at any given point you don't have to go and look up who the subcontractors are. You can work out which option they're working under because it's just part of the matter of fact, which you're going to correlate to the incoming applications for payment automatically. So that helps you develop that insight. And when you have rules that you want to apply, which are dependent on the type of option that particular subcontractor is under, you don't have to go worrying about how to work out which type of option they're under. You already have that part and you can build the rule from there. Also, similarly for things like whether the PM has already reviewed that subcontractor and accepted them into the project, which is often a clause under ECC. So there are various different rules here, but the concept is one of how do you build it. So we've got to 22. Martin, I see you come back on camera. Do you want to drop in at this point?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I hope that gave everybody a bit of an insight into the sort of things that that happen behind the scenes in the system that we've developed. And oh, I don't know what that is. Sorry. Wrong share. There we go. There we go. So how does this relate to you? So what I think we were trying to do when we were talking to the QSI board about this was to help people understand and change your expectations of what is coming, what is here in capability in terms of the assurance professional role. This is all being part of a whole series of tech things that are changing life in the construction world called Lean Construction 4.0. And it works for QSs and cost assurers as well as it works for everybody else. We wanted to raise your awareness so that you can understand the interface between automated process analysis. This is using some techniques in AI behind the scenes, but it's not AI, it's automated process analysis and commercial documentation, understanding that it works and supports, especially the UK public sector legislative landscape around the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, ECCTA there. If you haven't come across that, you need to get on board with it. In September last year, it changed the rules around fraud so that now it is a crime to not put in place the reasonable procedures to prevent fraud, not just the fraud. And the Public Procurement Act 23 also requires complete transparency of all this data. So it's no good being subjecting all of this cost assurance to samples anymore. I'm afraid we've got the legislative landscape has moved to mean that you've got to look at everything all the time. Associated persons under the ECCTA Act is anybody in the supply chain. If it's an incorporated client, if it's a government department, they're exempt. Everybody else is included, so all the way through to subcontractors. And not being able to prevent fraud at any level is a crime. And so it's a strict liability, corporate strict liability. There's an unlimited fine for it. And if you are under a contract that has got corrupt acts, which include breaking the law, then that gives the client the reason to terminate. I'm afraid under the Procurement Act 23, if you've had a contract terminated that's a public sector contract, the public sector has the ability to recommend to the Secretary of State to put you onto a naughty list, and that means you get disbarred from all government work for 5 years. So this is real serious stuff. Okay, so that's really why we thought it was relevant to you, and thank you very much for your time. Anything open for questions? And I haven't been looking at the chat, so I don't know what's going on. Whether there's anything in there. Nothing in there. Oh.
Thank you, Martin. That was really interesting. We're all very quiet. Anyway, oh, there we go. Somebody got
Mr. Blizzard. Break the ice.
Well, I think your introduction was really interesting because it's not just applicable to NEC contracts. It is, and it's a source. Well, you know, I'm a citizen arbitration adjudicator, and it is this understanding of the contract which creates so many disputes under the NEC, because so few people actually understand, whether you're on the contracting side, subcontracting side, or the employer's side, what they're supposed to do. And it also applies to JTT contracts, because the lawyers now change and amend the JTT contracts so heavily that for larger projects, that it's the same thing. And in fact, I recently had some submissions from a firm of solicitors who clearly hadn't read any of the amendments to the contract and were completely wrong. So that was just background. The question I've got really is, who and how is the project set up on your software? Do you have to start off with your software? Who puts it in so that you can retrieve this information, and do all the valuations have to go in on your software?
Okay, so there's two answers. One is the rules. So the rules are co-created. So the system's got the vanilla contract rules in it, and then the particular contract rules are co-created between the client, the project manager, or the architect, and the contractor. So everybody knows what those rules say. They've all agreed what they are. They're then coded in, and that's what gets applied. And as Andy said, as those on a monthly basis, if there's tweaks to them or amendments, then those go in from the point that they're there, and they're there for analysing. So that's the first thing. So get the system working as it should in line with the contract, and then every month the contractor's application is what goes in as the data, and that every month it's the cumulative data that goes in. And it's only held in the system while the contract's live. At the end of it, that analysed data goes out to, and every month it goes out as a report to the administrator to be able to make the decision and on what's being paid and what isn't being paid, and it follows absolutely follows the contract. So that's one of the things that we were seeing as a real benefit is if you're a client and we had 56 projects running all at the same time, I've got at least 56, if not 112 versions of how cost assurance should be done. If you use a system like this, you've got one. And so you get much more consistency across a program of activity. So yeah, every contractor is putting in their data, and the process is applied to the data, and the report comes out. We're talking with a client at the moment that is saying, I want the data to go in on the day of the assessment. I want the system to do the assessment. I want the allowable cost to be, the accepted cost to be paid. And if we need to sort out the data, it's a rolling application. So sort it out before the next application. I'm not going to go through the to-ing and fro-ing in the negotiation before the certificate goes out. The certificate is what you put in as correct data in accordance with the contract. And if it wasn't correct data in accordance with the contract, you're not getting paid.
So is it your view then that this will eliminate disputes over valuations?
The aim is to move to that. We're dealing with lots of humans, so there's a period. So what we've built into our service offer with this is that there's an onboarding process, and there's a human in the loop training process, because not only have we got to understand how the system works, you've got to understand how the results of the system now affect all the other things that are ripple effects from the commercial data. So your PMO needs to now know that what they're getting is absolutely clean data, not making adjustments for the corruption within the data they know that was there, but it was historically sampled. Now it's everything's gone in, it's clean. You've moved through maybe your first 3, 4, 6 months of getting people into the swing of there's no point in putting all this stuff in because it just gets pushed back. But now you've got clean data, all the other ripple effect things need to work out how they respond to a different data process.
And is this applicable to JCT contracts as well, or is it specifically for NEC contracts?
So what we've got at the moment is NEC, but it's a system. So what we need to do is just calibrate it to the terms of a JCT contract, and that would be a piece of time and a commission that we need to do. But what we've tried to do is build it flexibly enough that that won't be a major exercise. The same data occurs. So if you go back to a data line, you're going to need the same data, whether you're working under JCT or under NEC. And really what it is how you apply the rules to that data.
Great, thanks very much, Martin.
Does anyone else have any questions for Martin? Dr. Hampton.
Thank you, Suzanne. Martin, what's the protection in place to prevent someone corrupting this or adjusting the figures?
So just to explain that a little bit more, because the contractors put all the data in, the system will, yeah.
As with any computer system, it can be adjusted from, dare I say, university grades being hacked into, to contracts being adjusted to sort of support claims that have gone in that actually haven't got in, signatures that might have been used that haven't actually been signed off. So is there any preventative security or cyber security measures in place?
Yeah, so it's cyber secure. Plus, Ian, do you want to jump in and just help me on this?
So we're working on the basis of Cyber Essentials Plus and ISO 27001, so all of that kind of stuff is already taken care of.
Right, okay.
I guess I'll add in as well to that is that the places where data can be changed within the system are all audit trailed, so you can see the not only the timestamp of when a particular change was made, but it's attributable to the particular user who made it, and other types of changes are just not possible. So the database behind the scenes is locked down, so that changes can't be made except via the authorized methods, and then they're audit trailed. So where it's allowed to make a change, it's always attributable to who made it.
Right. And another awkward question, I suppose, where's the checks and balances, just in case someone puts the point in the wrong place, which from suddenly £100 is £100,000. Is there any checks and balances on that?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are. So if you imagine, so we've got a plan, haven't we? When we go into a project, we've got a plan. We know what we think the project's going to cost. We've got it broken down into your control accounts, and the control accounts have got what we think we're going to spend on it, when we think we're going to spend it on. And so part of the process with the project manager is to go through before the assessment and trigger down which control accounts should be in play because of the point at which you are in the program. So all of the data is then cross-referenced against, if you add up all the cost lines that are going to control account number one, where we thought we were going to spend £100,000 on control account number one, are they within that or are they outside of it? It also allows you to change a control account as a compensation event comes in, or add in a control account for a compensation event. So one of the real benefits of this is because you're taking out all of the hardship of doing cost assurance on an application, the humans can concentrate on change control much more. And so the ambition is that if you've diverted the humans onto the things that need to be human to do change control, actually that makes that much more contemporary. So as you're then looking at your cost assurance on a routine basis, you're looking at what's agreed in change control as well as what was in the original contract. And so you've got that cross-referenceable position to be in. The other thing that I just mentioned in that space is to be able. So one of the reasons, and it's one of the things that's interesting in NEC4, Keith, is this idea that under NEC4 you can, at a compensation event, you can create a date and then forecast what the costs are going to be and agree it there and then. And this system allows you to do that forecasting based on the granular historic data, because you can easily access what it's cost you to date.
Okay. Okay.
Anton, I assume you've come on because you lost something. No?
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I was just going to ask the same thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Martin, and Ian. That was really interesting. Thank you very much. So everyone, thank you all for attending. Our next event will be on, why have I written down the date? The 7th of May. We have James Garner, who is head of AI and data at Leeds, and he's going to talk to us about AI and data in construction, looking at practical use cases, governance, and what comes next. So that should be another really interesting event, and hope you can join us. Details will be coming out on the email soon. As always, if you need a copy of Martin's slides from today, or you'd like a CPD certificate, quick message in the chat now, or drop me an email at any time and I can sort that out for you. So again, thank you to Martin and his team for an interesting hour there, and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Well done, Martin. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
No problem. See you soon. Bye.
Well done, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you. Cheers, guys.
And you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So